At the live stream. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, I said, do we need a motion? We just need a call to order, don't we?
Yes, we need a call to order,
Okay.
Yes.
but we
If I
don't
can
need
have
a
call to
motion.
order. Welcome, Dr. Macklin.
Hey, hello. How you guys doing?
Good.
Good.
Great.
Okay. You were able to join us earlier than I thought. Dr.
Yes, that
Macklin.
is
Great.
correct. That is correct,
Okay.
Amy Schechter.
Yes.
Do you still want to go last?
I don't mind. I'll wait until you guys keep going in case I have anything that I need to add. That's great.
All
Okay.
righty.
Thanks,
Perfect. Well, we'll get started if that's okay. The
Yeah.
first policy that's on the screen is GBAD. This is a new policy proposed through the Missouri School Boards Association, which I brought to policy committee in April. We had some conversation about it. The only change I've made to that then would be what's highlighted in the first paragraph in yellow, and that is to specifically state that we may use telework days in the events of inclement weather days as well. So if there are any questions or any additional comments about this policy, I'm happy to address those now. So if it looks good as it stands, then this is something that I can add to the board agenda for the June 22nd meeting for a first reading.
Sounds good.
Okay, and then attached also is
You're right.
the regulation for this policy, but I made no changes to the regulation after our last policy committee. I just simply left it attached to the agenda for the board's reference in case it impacted at all any changes you thought we may need in the actual policy.
I had one question on this.
Of course.
One. I had a question on why we deleted on page 2. It was says telework employees are required to attend virtual district meetings and activities. Why'd we exclude? And I'm not saying that we needed or didn't need it, but I was just curious, why did we exclude unless excused by their supervisor?
I guess the thought would be that if they're working virtually and unable to attend, they should just put in their time as an absence. Correct? Or are you saying that they could just be, I'm open to them being able to be excused by their supervisor to work on something different at home or at their approved work location.
I thought I didn't even see any reason why taking that away from their supervisor.
Okay.
That was why.
Yeah, we can put that back in.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to matter much, but I
Yeah,
thought the supervisor is a supervisor. The supervisor should have control.
Yeah. Okay.
Unless somebody disagrees.
I'm
with
wondering
me.
if that was part of the language having to do with, it looked like the way it was originally written was that the telework could be a regular work option for some people. I'm not sure if that was the part of that language or not, but
maybe that's what, yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think when we give supervisors more autonomy to make decisions,
Yep.
that's a good thing in this situation.
Yeah, I would drop the last part and maybe required to attend in person.
Okay.
It's the supervisor is going to make the decision.
Okay,
And I would just add that unless excused by the supervisor.
Well, and if they're virtual meetings, presumably nobody's attending them in person.
Yeah.
right. Okay.
I had nothing else on this.
All right.
Anybody else have anything?
I'll clean it up for a final viewing on the next policy committee meeting, because that will follow the first reading. Obviously, this can't be adopted as a regulation until the policy's been to the second reading and approved. So it'll just be something that we just hold until the policy is approved.
Yeah.
Okay. Just make a note of that. Okay. GBAA. And originally in GBAA toward the bottom, I had taken out the such as taking tickets at events, and the recommendation of the policy committee was to leave that in. So it's highlighted there and it is back in and there are no other changes.
I let this one fly as it is, yeah.
Okay, policy committee, first reading on June 22nd. And then the two regulations that are accompanying it, we made no changes at the last policy committee. So after the revision is approved at policy committee, we can have Dr. Keenan sign those regulations.
Sounds good.
Not policy committee meeting, board meeting approvals after first and second reading.
So the items that were highlighted, like on GBA R1,
Yeah.
those were not new highlights. Those were,
Correct.
Only
Yep.
question I had on
Go
that,
ahead.
it's not a problem with the policy, it's just somebody explained to me. On what is an exempt employee?
Exempt from overtime.
Okay, I understood that. Why is I can understand why exempt executive, administrative, professional are computer employee. What's a computer employee? The tech people? They're all exempt?
There are very specific guidelines for computer employees with the Department of Labor on whether or not they are considered exempt.
Okay,
And so we're
Okay.
referring to the definition of exempt computer employees as defined by the Department of Labor.
okay, great. Is that referenced in here? Somewhere? No.
The Fair Labor Standards Act, that section of the Fair Labor Standards Act is, and that's for the Department of Labor, it's the Fair Labor Standards Act where it's specifically outlined, and that is referenced.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I'll see if it's referenced in the regulation.
I didn't see it in the reg.
It's
that's
not,
right.
but let's add that to the regulation. Let's add the same legal reference, don't you think?
Sounds great.
Okay.
Well, what was the rationale why they had computer exempt? Any reason? I know it's a federal law, so what is, but why?
Right, because a lot of the computer employees were working in your data entry, your software design, those types of activities in technology, and they were working as salaried employees, and they were working well beyond the Department of Labor's viewing of a typical day. And so what corporations were doing is paying them a salary, but they were sometimes working as many as 10 or 12-hour days. And so
Wow.
they had to set forth very specific guidelines that said those individuals that can do that based on their level of pay and position in the corporation can do that. They can be considered administrative and do that based on a salary. But if they don't meet those salary and promotional thresholds, they must be paid overtime if they exceed that 8 hours.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Which one do we have next? GBCA. Okay, this is back to our favorite one that we've been kind of going around and around about, GBCA and BBFA. So in both,
Regulation.
yes, the regulations. So after our last policy committee meeting, I did reach out to MSBA and ask the question that the board had put forth, which is why these changes were being recommended in regards to gifts and gratuities related to receiving meals and playing on golf teams, as it's been accepted in the past and practiced at the annual MSBA conference, is what I put in my question. I'm not reading the entire email. And then just why now is this change in language being recommended? And please, any clarification. So their legal counsel got back to me and said that it's the changes made, it's just a suggestion, and each board is to set its own regulation and to set its own maximum valuable for acceptable gifts of these types. So I don't know that we're in any different place than we were before I asked the question.
but it was a non-answer, in other words.
Yeah. And the thing that strikes me on this is they violate this every time we do MSBA. Because
Well, I
they,
didn't put that in my question.
no, but
yeah.
they, the cocktail hour that is sponsored, it's sponsored by Stiefel,
Right.
and that's their
And I guess-
bonding people.
And I guess I did put that in my question because this has been accepted in the past and in practice at the
Yeah.
annual MSBA conference. So I guess I did put that in the question. So I did just, based on our conversation that we've had ongoing with this, and the most recent is highlighted in yellow on page. So this is the staff conflict of interest. So
5
this
of
is on page
6.
5 of 6.
Yeah.
At the top, and that's where I added that amount, that value in the excess of, and we had talked about $100 for staff gifts. And I included that language that said, and intended to create an undue influence or advantage.
I think that second stuff, plus on this one, we have on here that unless authorized by the board or the employee's immediate supervisor.
Yes,
So I'm guessing if, I felt like that covered it on this,
right.
but I thought it didn't cover the board at all.
No, but that's because
It's
that's
not the board, yeah.
BBFAR.
Yeah.
That's the next
Yeah.
one.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm glad we put the language about the undue influence, because obviously, when we were at the graduation, parents were giving teachers gifts, and it was,
Yeah.
a very appropriate, interaction. And
Right.
I agree. That was the highlight of my week.
Those graduations are great. Okay. So if you're okay, I will clean this up for Dr. Keenan's signature.
Sounds good.
And then BBFA with the board, the only change then after my follow-up with MSBA on page 4, we indicated that we were going to set that dollar. Oh, nope, you're right, Brita. I'm sorry. Before that, page 3, we wanted to make sure that when we talked about having to submit a report to the secretary of the board, if there was a statement of a conflict of interest, we wanted to say, except in the interest of hiring. We didn't want anytime somebody knew or was related to someone that a board member could simply recuse themselves. And that's addressed later in the policy, but we wanted to specify it in this section. So that's there.
Yeah, and I was just noticing, I just had a quick comment. Because that's the section on nepotism is what you're referring to when he says addressed later, right?
Yes.
But that addresses family members.
Mhm.
There, of course, could be other undue interests related to hiring that aren't just related to family members. And I was just thinking about that, and I'm not sure how to.
Yeah.
Again, there may be situations arising. I can't think of a specific example, but
Yeah.
I could make one up where there might be a conflict of interest without a familial relationship. That again, I think the issue was that you don't want to have to write some. You don't want to have to put something in writing every time. But a board member should abstain from that vote.
Right.
And I think again, I'm sorry, I've got to go back and remember the reading, but the conflict of interest, I think, was in the nepotism section, just talked about family members. I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
and they talk about them in the 4th degree, and
Yeah.
then in the definitions, it's where that all of those people that fall in that 4th degree on the first page, that's where they are all outlined.
Yeah. But should we say something about in a situation where there's not a familial relationship, but there is a conflict of interest?
Mhm.
And where would we put that? It wouldn't go under nepotism. That specifically applies to family members. And do we need to specifically address that? I mean, again, is it?
Well, I think in that statement of interest section on page 3, where it says before voting, board members who have substantial personal or private interest in a decision before the board, they shall provide a written report, the nature of the interest to the board secretary, except in the interest of hiring. Then does that assume that in the interest of hiring, you would make a statement? So would it go
No.
there? So we have
No.
another sentence.
No,
following?
because-
I think it specifically would mean that, I guess, if you did not make a verbal statement or an indication, I mean, we might want to say in the cases of hiring, a board member may either make a written statement or abstain from the vote.
Okay,
Would that be okay? Like that way,
Yeah.
you don't have to say what the conflict of interest is in the case of hiring, but you should also then abstain from the vote.
You realize I would bet you 99% will abstain from the vote.
Which is fine. Again, in the case of hiring, you don't have to say what you're, give a horrible example here, but let's say, you have a girlfriend and that person has been getting hired. You may want to abstain from the vote without saying why. You don't have to provide something written, but you probably
Right.
shouldn't vote on that.
right. And even if it isn't the board member themselves, it could be the board member's child is engaged to the person.
Right.
So it's not family yet based on definition, but will be, or it's still a
And so you just
conflict.
want to be able to say something like, I'm not going to vote on this, but we don't want to have to, put something in writing every single time for hiring, because
Yeah.
it's so often.
You're right.
Again, I have a family member who is further than a fourth degree relation. They are not a fourth degree relation, but I abstain from those votes. It's nice to not have to write a formal letter every time. It's nice to be able to just say, I'm not going to vote on this one.
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
All right.
I will make that change. Excuse me. And then when we look at page 4, we had talked about making that amount $500 instead of just saying the amount established by the board. Are we wanting to stick with 500, or have we had more opportunity to give that thought since the last meeting to think about maybe leaving that as $500 or an amount approved by the board?
$500 seems like a healthy hunk to me.
It's a lot. I was gonna say it's a lot. That's a big.
I had to double check my notes, but I did write down in 3 places $500. So I think we
that was
said it.
because I think that was the amount that was referenced in other,
Okay.
in other rules or laws by the state. I think that's why we chose that number, but
Okay,
that creates a lot of questions.
that's a big dollar amount.
Yeah, if you're getting something like that from anyone who are having any kind of business interaction with.
So we put 100 for staff. We could be consistent, or we could just keep it with the amount established by the board.
But then doesn't the board have to establish an amount?
I mean, isn't that in the policy? That's the amount that would be the.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, MSBA's suggestion is $100.
I mean, I'm fine with 100.
I don't think any meal that is given at MSBA is $100. So yeah, I'm fine with $100.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then on page 5, in that nepotism section, we did want to restate that there is no additional requirement to submit a letter to the secretary of the board.
Correct.
And those were the changes I made based on our last discussion. And I've got a couple more changes to make that we can look at June, the June meeting. And hopefully after that one, we can get it cleaned up for a signature.
Sounds good.
Okay. GCPB made some updates to this policy because, it's been an ongoing struggle with staff that sign contracts and then wanting out of contracts. And so making the policy a little bit clearer. And so adding in that first paragraph that the board will consider the release of a non-tenured teacher prior to June 1 if a suitable replacement can be found and the teacher submits the payment of liquidated damages, as that's the practice that the board has been using. And then next paragraph, no changes. The following paragraph, changing the terms resign to release. They really can't resign. They really must be released. So we should be consistent in that language. And that's the bottom of that first page, Rita.
Okay.
And then we had talked about clarifying and removing some of the vagueness of the reasons for release. And so we had said, board consider a serious illness, adding which prevents the employee from working in any capacity. That would help us in the situations where an employee is too ill for work for special school district, but not too ill to work for the district next door. And then transfer of a spouse, and then we put for employment purposes, and then promotion, and we had talked about to an administrative position in another school district. And then again, going back, refraining from using the term resignation and referring to it as contract release.
I
Just-
like this. Can we hold to this? I mean.
Yes, we
will
have been.
Follow this?
And this is just the comment about the liquidated damages is that's something that is that other people, if they read that, they know what that means and how
Yes,
that's
and that's outlined in the teacher contract that they sign.
okay.
I thank you for adding the words Amy Schechter release instead of resign. I think that provides clarity, which is
Yes.
key.
Okay. All right, if we're good, then first reading June 22. Okay, and then the last policy that I have is actually a regulation. So policy, and it's a new regulation that has been created by our family engagement department and to accompany policy IGBC. And so really in looking at the opportunity for more and more staff to do home visits and participate in home visits, even beyond our administrators, our social workers and those types of employees, especially as we've had more and more students learning virtually, and it's become more and more accepted practice, that really an opportunity in this regulation, they have in that first section, they really defined a home visit, and then they very specifically outlined what special school district views home visits to be and what they are not to be. And then looking at with those home visits, then what should take place? Why should you do a home visit? What you should do during the visit, what those procedures are, what you should do in that post-visit. And then really even more specifically outlining then at the bottom of page 2 into page 3, and I apologize, I'm just seeing that the numbering is off. It's all says page 1 of 3. I'll fix that. And then looking at very specifically, so this is ensuring that our staff are safe, that our students are treated, students and families are respected and treated equitably when these visits occur, and that all the appropriate notifications, documentation, and follow-up has taken place during those visits. So I will answer any questions that I have, but I will say that I have read this and reviewed this, but it was not drafted by me.
I just had a question. Again, this is so this might just be my lack of familiarity with the terms we want to use. But on the, I think it's the first page one. Let me double check here. There we go. So in the last paragraph, we have the second sentence. Individuals serving in these capacities should participate in training. The next sentence, these trainings should possess the following structures. Does that mean that they do not necessarily have to participate in training and that the trainings don't have to possess those qualities? Is that intentional, or
Right.
meaning,
Yes.
are we trying to put some flexibility into the regulation there, or is that
Yes, we are trying to put some flexibility because staff that are expected to do the home visits do participate in the training, and that the training covers everything. But sometimes you have a staff that may visit one home in 5 years.
Okay.
So they're not necessarily going to have been expected to wait to do that home visit until they receive the very specific training that is referenced in policy. Any other questions?
No, I'd say let this one fly.
Okay. And then on the agenda, I did indicate that MSBA had recommended the review of financial policies, DC, and DCR, which refer to the taxing and borrowing authority and limitations. as well as DJF, which is purchasing. So Dr. Hogg, our Chief Operations Officer, and his team did review those policies and the MSBA recommendations, and they are making no recommended changes to the policy as its policies or regulations as they are currently adopted by the board. So just making you aware that that process did take place, but no changes were recommended as a result.
Okay. Can we see that policy even with no changes? I just would like to have a date on there that we've seen it, reviewed it, and made no
Okay.
changes.
So make a date that we've reviewed it.
Right, and then, so then when we look at the review on each policy, you know, we say the date last reviewed, at least we would have a date that we reviewed it within this time period.
I will do that. Okay. That brings us to Dr. Macklin. I'm going to let him take the wheel.
Great, thank you. Here. Rita, are you going to, I guess I can just share my screen there so that we all can see.
I think she can open it.
Oh,
Yeah. That's what she was doing for me.
great,
Yeah.
perfect, thank you.
Mhm.
So let me say this, happy to be here to take a look at the policies and the regulations. I have reviewed with an equity lens policies and regulations before for school districts, and I will say that Amy Schechter does a fabulous job as relates to both the policy and the regulation, because when it comes down to it, the office of the chief office of human resources is the one who a lot of times is held accountable for those pieces. And so through my lens, she does a fabulous job at that. So I'm going to get into this here. I know that I am on the clock here, right? And so I am going to get started, President Cuneo and then Director Esner here.
Thank you.
And so when we look at here, the first regulation, as we talk about policy here, the first regulation is actually from the district wellness policy, which was the date it was adopted in 2017. This is a policy or regulation that is often confused, and often you find a lot of inequities in the policy or in the regulation, I should say. And so when we take a look at this here, at the elementary school level lunch periods will follow recess. That's actually correct. That's what the regulation says. And that's actually what you want to do there, because the National Service Management Institute notes that a lot of times, if it does not, students will rush through their lunch to get to recess. However, when you look at this regulation, this is one of the most regulations in school districts that are not followed. And so just as a precautionary measure, I am not saying that special school district is not following this, but I'm saying as a precautionary measure, this is one that we want to highlight. We want to make sure that we keep on our forefront. And that's as simple as adding a procedure, monitoring procedure for elementary lunch recesses, and just speaking to.
And actually, I just a quick comment, because I'm actually looking at the regulation, page 4.
Mm-hmm.
Under meal times, item number 3 states at the elementary level, lunch periods will follow recess periods.
Yes. Yes.
So is that
Yes.
that's the
Yes.
that's the item you're referring to?
Yes, yes, Director. Yes, yep. And on the screen, it's item number 3 here. At the elementary level, lunch periods will follow recess, according to National Food Service Institute. So that is correct. That's right there. The regulation's right there.
So, but you're meaning like we want to make sure that make sure that it's being like a procedure to check.
100%, because
Okay.
this is where you see a large inequity that happens in schools with just something so similar as lunch and recess. And so this is a very large one, a lot of times, that is brought to the forefront. And so this is, I would recommend a procedure or something to ensure, to check to make sure that's going on. Okay. Should I keep going, Amy Schechter?
Please.
Okay, all right. So then the next the next here regulation BB-R really focuses on school board governance and operations. And so when you pull up this, Rita, can you do me a favor, please? Can you click on the blue there, control click where it says, but yep, control click right there. And scroll down a little bit to the middle for me. And I think right there. So a redistricting committee shall consist of 3 residents within the district appointed by the Board of Education and Special Education District of St. Louis County, and 3 additional persons resident within Special School District St. Louis County appointed to the Board of Education. Okay, make that note there, right? 3 residents within the district, and then 3 additional persons resident within the Special School District of St. Louis County appointed to the State Board of Education. Can you go back now to that for me, Rita, back to that regulation that we had there? Great. So the reason why this is vital, because the inequity is that there is a possibility of multiple residents from the same sub-district comprising of the redistrict committee. Let me say that again. There is a possibility of multiple residents from the same sub-district committee comprising of the redistrict committee. And so my recommendation from the regulation here, BB-R, would be to just ensure and maybe look at refining redistricting committee as being comprised as 1 resident from each sub-district committee would be my recommendation. Does that make sense? Am I making sense there?
Makes sense to me, but I'm trying to think. I don't know if I've ever heard of a committee that was appointed by the board to redistrict. You know, to check for redistricting.
And I mean, how large of a committee would that be if we have 1 resident from each sub-district?
9.
And how would you, I mean, that's a lot of people.
But I Rita, do you know, can you remember any time we've had this? So we've had this committee?
We had the redistricting committee right after the 2010 census.
Okay.
And now we have the 2020 census, but the results are not out yet. They told me to call back after September. And we will, if the numbers change on our weighted vote a lot, we will have to do another redistricting committee.
I like the idea of having more people involved. Are we going to be able to get enough people?
Could we maybe, instead of saying from each sub-district, from, different sub-districts?
Yes.
So we don't
Yes.
end up with all the
Yes.
volunteers from the same
Yes.
sub-district, I think
Yes.
is what
Yeah.
Dr. Mecklen's trying to prevent.
And that's, and again, I'm sorry, I only had about 20 minutes to review the whole sheet because we got this yesterday morning. But that was on first reading, at least that's what I thought I was reading, was that the recommendation was for people from different sub-districts as opposed to 1 from each, which is.
Yeah.
A lot.
And so then that would keep the committee at 6, which is much more manageable.
I can still see how there could be potentials there for issues, because again, I think there's over-representation with some districts, but I wonder if there's a way to be thoughtful about this and practical.
Okay.
And I know a decision doesn't have to be made today, but it was
Right.
just something that as I was reviewing, I wanted to bring forward through the equity lens.
And so what I'll do then is, as we go through future policy subcommittees based on the agenda and allocated time, I will bring these recommendations in policy recommendations or regulation recommendations for more extensive discussion.
Great. Thank you, Amy Schechter. Great.
And Dr.
So then-
Macklin being on the committee can be part of that.
Great. So the next actually couple here is a delve into them here. And I will say this as I delve into them. I understand that state law can't be changed. Or I understand that the persons who are streaming live here don't necessarily have the auspice to change state law, but I just wanted to be brought to the attention here when we talk about inequities that could arise here. So one is school board member qualifications. And I'll just delve into this here. A person may not be delinquent in payment of any income taxes, personal property taxes, municipal taxes, real property taxes on their place of residence. I 100% understand the regulation. I understand that it is actually not derived from SSD, but it actually is state law. But I do want to say that while we can't change state law, we need to also be cognizant to ensure that that it is being administered equally, and that all board candidates recognize the exclusion that could happen of less affluent citizens. And so I'm just bringing this to the forefront. I do know it is state law, but it is something that I think that should be brought to the forefront. And there are a couple others under this same kind of auspice as we move down.
Do you have any suggestions about how to address that inequity within the confines of the law?
Well, I do. I think that Director Asner, that the law itself, I think that is a viable piece that will be there and will be standing. But I think that making sure that the law itself does not benefit the affluent is how you could maybe change that. And so I would love to delve into more conversation about that a little bit more, but I think just making sure the law itself and who it benefits is how you could do some adjusting to that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I guess I was just wondering if you know, apart from the awareness, I can't think of anything. That's why I was just curious.
And I would love to be able to answer that question a little bit more in depth and come back with some more in-depth answers to that.
Yeah.
Okay. Rita, if we can scroll down for me. So again, I said that the next couple school board vacancies really deal with those same pieces. So really the exact same. So those two go hand in hand to go from there as the vacancies, just as the previous one did, and also does the board official. So I will follow up, Amy Schechter, with some more in-depth responses to those three, because I'm sure that will be the same answer to go from there. All right, Rita, if we can scroll down just a little bit for me here under my findings. So regulation DDR, which is fiscal management grants here. One of the most common inequities, and this was adopted 2018, but one of the most common inequities you see in a school district is grants. Because of the amount of grants, how grants are arrived, what is the process of grants. And so it is clear here that the superintendent or a designee would sign off if a grant is received. The inequity is that ensuring that everyone is following that policy, and that some grants, just as we just talked about, the dollar amount are very, 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 very small. For example, Crayola will give a $50 grant or a $25 grant for crayons and markers, right? And so the question is just that, do we need to take a look at some point? It doesn't have to be now, but putting a dollar amount on what that may look like as far as obtaining permission from the supervisor or superintendent to prepare or who grants the readiness of the grant to go from there. I do agree that everyone knowing the grant is key, but I'm not quite sure that if a teacher is applying for a $15 or $20 grant, that has to seek approval. So that, again, that's just an inequity that can be brought to the forefront there, and can also provide some explanation on that one also.
I'm sorry, out of curiosity, is there a counter argument to that? I mean, is there a reason why every grant needs to be logged and approved?
Talk to Dr. Haug and find out.
Okay, I'm just curious if there's like a regulatory issue with here, or you know, a fiscal issue where we would need to.
Yeah, I made a note to do a little follow-up, so I can do that.
Because that makes a lot of sense. So why would we want to, you know, I mean, the whole point of these small grants is that at some point your time isn't worth it. And so we want to make it worth your time by making it take less time.
Yeah, definitely.
Great, thank you. And then the next regulation here, actually, purchasing here, DGF-R, and really deals with here, as it talks about purchasing, persons who are on the list, and that list, if you can click on that for me, Rita, that purchasing under the blue there for me. There we go. And just scroll down a little bit for me here. Okay.
It's a long one.
It is. It is.
Rita, thank you for your patience in driving us today.
Yes, I really do appreciate it.
No problem.
I really do appreciate it. Oh man, Mister, go back. Rita, can you go back? I know you're driving the ship here. Can you just go back to my submission, or the submission of the grant? What's there for me? Great. So when we talked about, you can stay right there. That's great. When we talked about purchasing and really the district purchasing list and being able to access and be a part of that list, how that comes about, ensuring that minority-owned publications and business events and entrepreneurial events, and making sure that there is a equitable and everyone has a chance to be on that list is key. And so that's what that regulation speaks to.
Okay.
If we go to the next one, there, which is student transportation, EEA-R1. Dr. Jeff Hogg is probably, I can feel him on my shoulder here, right? Just because of finance and then now transportation. So the student transportation here, just ensuring that when we look at this regulation, there's a lot of rigidness that comes in guidelines for routes that may be causing unnecessary hardship. And so that's a regulation that we might just want to delve into and look at what those possibilities are. And I understand because of a safety of students and also because of litigation, but I think that's just something that we may want to delve into.
Do you have any suggestions, again, for concrete changes? I know you wrote a couple of examples, but that would apply specifically to that.
I do. There are a couple of examples that I did write. One is a situation where a young lady who lived 10 minutes from school spent almost 20 minutes on a bus, right? Because of the routes, right? And so it's not like those routes don't get changed once they're brought to someone's attention, which has happened, but just ensuring that we're looking and that the rigidness and the practice of it is not impacting students. So that's an example right there, Director Asner.
I remember right, when we reviewed this policy before, we probably also, if we're going to look at it again, we need to look at our insurances. Because what had happened was, I remember the last time we looked at this, one of the big things was if you have a sibling who is not with SSD, but you're the one child rides the bus, the other child can't. Then it became, should we allow everybody to be, to ride the same bus? That would seem like a good idea. But then we found out that we would be liable because our insurance would not cover the child that was not on SSD. Now, I am not saying that that's still that same way, but I remember the big hassles over that.
Okay.
If we take a look at this, I'd like to have the insurance people also looking at it with us.
Okay. Yes. That makes a lot of sense.
Good. Can you scroll down just a little bit for me, Rita? Thank you. President Cuneo.
Keep going down, sorry.
Yes, just, yeah. Okay, so the one before this, Rita, there's one more before this. Thank you, right there, great. So when we look at FEC-R, and really talks about the selection of construction management services, and one of the largest ways of going through the selection process, it states in the regulation, is to use newspapers, right? Advertisement in newspapers, right? And so the question comes is, when using that advertisement in newspapers, who is that intended to reach, and what audience solely takes a look and zeroes in on those newspapers? And so advertisement not in minority-owned publications may hinder that opportunity for everyone to have a chance when you take a look at those construction management services. So just something to look at. And then the last one. Really deals with here IGAEB-R1 instruction here. And so when you delve into this regulation here, and I'm not sure everyone has a chance to read it, but when you delve into this regulation here, the inequity is that only adoption is mentioned, and that the positive aspects of adoption also should include other disadvantages of adoption. And if you have not, when you delve into it, you'll take a chance to read it, and then I can come back and do some more work with it.
This is one that we went round and round on in previous years because of restrictions that Missouri's Constitution has. For example, one of the sexual health instruction, or some of the best ones that come out of Planned Parenthood. But because of Planned Parenthood has an avocation of abortion, we were not allowed to use it. There's
Yep, I get it.
There's, when we talked about this before, it seemed every time we tried to go a different way, Missouri's Constitution said we could not. Now, I'm clearly not a lawyer, but when we do, I think I'd like to see what the statutes say, what we can change and not change.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think
I'm not saying what you're saying is wrong at all. I thought our hands were tied last time.
So just to be clear, sorry to ask for clarification. Right now in our sexual health curriculum, what's being taught is should you have a pregnancy, the options are having the child or giving up the child for adoption.
That's correct.
And those are the two options that are discussed in school.
Yes.
By law.
Okay.
We cannot mention the word abortion.
I see.
Okay.
And I'm not going to get into to whether we should or should not. It was
No, I,
just really restricted what we could do.
correct.
I was just curious again
And it even, Dr. Asner restricted the coursework that we could take, because there's some excellent coursework from Planned Parenthood that has no discussion about abortion, but because they're affiliated with abortions, we could not deal with them, which seemed to me ludicrous. But
Thank
Cool.
you, Dr. Macklin. I know a lot of work went into that, a lot of time to look at all those policies and regulations. You and I may be the only people outside of Dr. Asner and Dr. Cuneo now that have looked at all the policies in the district. So thank you for doing that.
I have not yet looked at all of the policies in the district.
but you will.
You will. Don't you
You will.
worry, you will.
Fine.
And again, I do want to, I have said this privately and I need to say this publicly. After reviewing all the policies and then all of the regulations in the district, I do want to give kudos to Amy Schechter because
Oh, well,
for
thank
me to bring forefront this minimal amount after reviewing all of those is a credit to
Well,
the Board of
and
Education.
And I must share most of that with Dr. Paul Bauer, who handed this off to me upon his retirement. And so he had it in good shape to pass off. So, yeah,
That's good.
thank you.
That's good.
Okay, so I know that our next policy subcommittee meeting is scheduled for June the 25th via Zoom at 1:30. Is that still going to work for the board members?
Sounds good.
I will not be present for that meeting.
Okay,
You don't want to give up your vacation for this?
Not for this one.
okay, well, that's okay. Well, I will still send you the policies, recommendations and
Thank you.
things. And if there's anything really pressing in it that you would like, Dr. Asner, for us to wait on until you're able to join us, just reply and let me know, because obviously there's nothing that would necessarily be pertinent that would have to be discussed or decided upon in your absence.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay, and then I will, I wanted to also, before we end today, kind of clarify, would you prefer to receive these printed at the board meeting prior to the policy subcommittee, so the Tuesday evening prior to the Friday meeting, or would you prefer they be emailed? And then, so would you like to get them printed or emailed, and then when would you like to receive them?
Is this a question to me or to?
To the group.
I don't have a preference for print or electronic. I mean, we might as well save the paper. It's a lot of paper. So
It's a lot. Mhm.
I would like to receive them, I guess, at least a week ahead of time.
Okay,
Because,
so the Friday before?
yeah, that would be ideal. Or even, the board meeting before, well, I guess that's if we're going to do print, but
Yeah.
just at least a week before, because
Okay.
otherwise it's hard to find the time to review
Of course.
everything sufficiently.
Okay,
I'll agree with that.
Okay.
The sooner the better. I'll print them out because I like to take notes on them, but
yeah, okay. All right, any policies that anyone on the committee would like to see addressed at the June 25th meeting? No, okay. Well, thank you very much for your time today. Thank you, Rita.
Thank you.
thank you. Everybody have a good Memorial Day.
You too.
Thank
Take
you
care.
all. Thank you
Bye,
all.
Mm.
Bye. Okay, thanks, Rita.
Thank you. Marco, stop it now.
Okay, thanks.
Hello, we are done. All right, thank you. Okay, bye.